Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avataravarishthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Sudhismrtipurananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavatpadam shankaram lokashankaram. So we are continuing the discussion, the 7 questions put forward by the student. One is, what is Atman and what is an Atman? So, 2 questions. We are already discussing what is Atman. In continuation of this, the author says a few very important things about how we get deluded, how we lose our true understanding of our nature in our everyday life, when our mind connects with or interacts with various experiences. It's like something being concealed and something being projected in its place. It's called avarana and vikshepa, 2 dimensions of Maya. So Maya operates in this world through these 2 dimensions, avarana and vikshepa. Avarana means concealing the true nature. Vikshepa means projecting the false, concealing the real, the genuine, and projecting the false. These are 2 aspects of Maya. So there are a very few very important statements in this text. The first one that we are going to discuss is, maybe you can turn to verse 142 and 143 deals with these subjects. And also later we'll discuss 145 also, which is a very graphic description of how this happens. Perhaps we can begin with 145. It's more graphic. There's a lot of poetry, imagery, a lot of illustration and analogy in it. It's a very famous verse. Kabalida dinanathe durdine santramekaihi vyethayeti himachanchavayu yathaidan avirata tamasa atmani avrude modhabuddhim kshapayeti bhavadukkhehi tivra vikshepa shakti. This is the verse. It's a very famous verse. Now you can think of blazing sun, wonderful, brilliant sunlight. Now this sunlight can be completely concealed when some dark clouds enter the sky. So far as we are concerned, there is no sun. We see only cloud. For that moment, we don't experience the presence of the sun. So the verse is, technically the translation is very simple. Even as a person walking in the streets may suffer from untold hardships when he goes out on a rainy day, when Dinanatha means the Lord of Day is sun. When this sun is concealed, because the day is subjected to blasts of cold winds, strong winds, Jamchavada is mentioned, Ugre means long, strong storms and winds and dark clouds. So what happens? The sunlight is completely concealed from the traveler. Then what happens? He may fall, he may hit a stone, he may lose his track. And what he sees is a series of unreal things because of the clouds which he sees and the absence of sunlight which is hidden from him. He faces a number of problems. Similarly, when we lose the sunlight of our true nature, Atman, we become victims of other things other than Atman. When we forget we are Atman, then what happens is every day, every moment, whatever our mind experiences, we identify with that. It's a sudden tragedy, a sudden problem, a sudden hardship when we encounter. Suddenly we interpret ourselves to be the person who just becomes a victim of that problem. Let us say, to give an example, people lose their health, their peace of mind, they sleep when they lose money. Because when that happens, the person looks upon himself as somebody who accumulates money. So when that is lost, then what happens? He feels he is lost. It's because the mind interprets wealth as the only thing that matters in life. So he interprets himself as somebody who makes wealth or reputation or any of these things. So every moment our mind connects with various external objects, sensual objects. It need not be external objects. It could be happiness, unhappiness, etc. So instead of Atman, which is our true nature, which is never unhappy because it doesn't chase happiness. It doesn't go after happiness, so it can avoid the problem of ever becoming unhappy. So that's our true nature. This is completely forgotten. In its place, what is projected is, when this true nature is concealed, which is avarana, means concealed, what happens? Something else is projected. This happens simultaneously. Projection doesn't happen without concealment. And concealment is never without projection. So, there are much more descriptions later. So skepticism, bitterness, negativity, desire, anger, all these, which are all matters concerning the mind, which is certainly not our true nature, because the true nature is concealed as the sunlight is concealed. In its place, the storm becomes the real thing. The clouds, the dust, the rains, and the earthquake, maybe the landslides, all days become the reality instead of the sunlight. So our true nature is concealed and the false projections take place. What are false projections? The text tells you kama krodhadi means. So concealment happens due to tamoguna. Now tamoguna is characterized by ignorance, inactivity, sleep, dullness, all this. Rajoguna is characterized by extreme activity and restlessness. Activity related to restlessness. There is another kind of activity. You can be active, still be fully in a state of restfulness, very sattva-guna. In Rajoguna, what happens? Activism always involves mind connecting or interacting and identifying with various mental emotions and feelings and attitudes. So suppose we can watch our own emotions, then we will be able to disconnect ourselves with these mental projections. See, you cannot sit in the gallery and watch the drama and also act in the drama. So if we can watch the drama of our own life, if we can watch our own anger, see, it is possible. When a person starts spiritual life sincerely, what happens? You develop this unique skill of turning the flashlight into our own system. Yeah. And that's the only difference between a spiritual seeker and an ordinary person. An ordinary person never is not able to watch himself. He identifies himself with every momentary impulse and emotions. So he's always participating in the drama on the stage. And if you are an actor, you won't be able to enjoy the drama. You don't have to pay for a ticket, but also you will not be able to enjoy the drama being played out on the stage. So if you want to enjoy the drama, you should be sitting on an easy chair in the gallery. For that, you should be different from an actor. So in real life, if we can dissociate ourselves with our mind, its aberrations, the impulses, feelings, and all these, then we can also watch and observe, oh, here I am losing my balance, I am getting angry. So once you are aware of the fact that you are getting angry, then you won't be angry anymore. Awareness of your own anger and anger do not coexist. When awareness comes, then anger is gone. So when you sit on the stage, then you are no more acting on the when you are sitting on the gallery, you are no more acting on the stage. In fact, the Buddha's original discourse is in Pali language. It is called Satipatthana sutta. It means Smrti Sutram. It is a long discourse on the state of mind remaining in continuous perpetual awareness. When you are aware of your own mind becomes a witness, and then this kama krodha, these projections will not be experienced. And what does it mean? When there are no projections, it also implies there is no concealment, because concealment actually is experienced in the form of projections. When we identify with sensory objects, that also implies that we are not identifying with our true nature. If there are projections, it means the reality is concealed. If the reality is concealed, it is inevitable that concealment will be accompanied by projections. So that's a great imagery. So when we are not able to see the sunlight, when the sunlight is hidden from us, that particular day is called a bad day, durdinam. So mekachanne agni durdinam, that's the definition in the ancient Sanskrit dictionary. The Kosa it is called. Means a bad day is the day when the sunlight is hidden from you. And how? Because of strong clouds and strong, dark, thick clouds which are agitated and moved by strong winds. And this process continues. This movement of the clouds and the movement of the strong winds continue. As a result, what happens? We mistake the unreal for the real, because we mistake the real for the unreal. Both happens. Both together happen. Now, how do we remove these dark clouds? This can happen through sadhana-chatushtaya that we already discussed earlier. If we can keep in our mind as to what is real, and that conviction of what is real will automatically be accompanied by the rejection of what is unreal. This happens in See, happens in everyday life, even in ordinary life situations. Suppose we face a problem. Once we understand that this problem is a natural characteristic of the game we call life, then the problem is no more felt a problem. A problem is experienced to be a problem because we anticipate a situation without any problem, which is really an impossibility. So the problem is always is the result of anticipating a situation minus problems. So that's now, how do we do that? By being convinced of the reality of our true nature, and then we don't worry about the unreal things. And then the other disciplines, sadhana-chatushtaya, the control of the mind, control of the senses, concentration, a sense of sanctity, and also strong desire to remove these clouds, or rather to remain with the firm conviction that there is a sunlight, and these clouds will come, but they won't be there all the time. Strong winds will disappear, clouds also will disappear. So once we are aware of this truth, then an impermanent, temporary disappearance of sunlight and a temporary impermanent appearance of the dark clouds will not cloud our mind. So that is how to come out of this problem. This is called adhyasa in the technical Advaita dialectics. Adhyasa means superimposition. Every day, every moment, every mental experience is prompting us to practice, to do adhyasa, means superimposing the unreal on the real, because the real is concealed and the unreal is projected. And that is the real cause of all bitterness, all skepticism, all doubts, and also the conflicts between what we want to do and what we end up doing. This difference. All sincere spiritual seekers want to practice. But still, when the dark clouds appear, we forget the fact that behind these dark clouds, there is a hidden sun and sunlight. So that should be remembered. At the physical level, dark clouds are unavoidable. So in this life, it's natural there will be problems. And the ocean cannot be without waves. You find in many Vedantic texts, Viveka, many other texts, so you find this idea. Ocean doesn't belong to waves. Swamiji was putting this in modern English in his statement. Ocean can be or cannot be. Ocean can be experienced without waves and also with waves. But there can be no wave without an ocean. So the waves belong to the ocean doesn't belong to the wave. So when there is an ocean, there will be waves, there will be foams, there will be movements of water. We can't help it. But the true nature of the ocean remains undisturbed. So even in the midst of all these experiences, there is the reality of the sun behind. It is only for some time hidden by the dark clouds. That's all. So the author Shankaracharya has got something more to say about this in the previous one. Mahamoha Graha Grasana Galida Atma Avagamanu Tiyo Nanavasthaha Swayam Abhinayan Tad Gunataya Apari Samsari Vishe Vishadburi Jalanidho Nimanched Manchayam Pramadi Kumadi Kuchidagadi. That is, it describes how people without any spiritual aspirations get caught in this terrible ocean of waves of happiness and unhappiness, momentary impulses and emotions and good and bad experiences, and get caught and not able to fully understand that behind these waves, behind all these forms and movements of water, there is a reality of ocean which by its very nature is calm and quiet. So that's what I said. So here is interested, life, this intellect, life or intellect, which is perverted, which is attracted towards these transient momentary impulses and feelings of hatred and anger, bitterness and skepticism, happiness and jubilation, all these together can't catch the human mind. And such a mind or intellect is compared to a crocodile. It's a crocodile of delusion. What happens, this crocodile doesn't leave you. So, at this stage, when we are caught by this crocodile of delusion, what is the delusion? When we identify ourselves with this body, and when we think we have nothing other than this body, then the slightest bodily problems becomes a great dilemma. When we identify ourselves with the emotions, we identify ourselves with this mind, then also the slightest mental anxiety, bitterness, skepticism becomes an insurmountable tragedy. Then what happens? We are caught in the jaws of crocodile. And when this happens, as the waves rise and fall, human life also goes through these momentary impulses, happiness and unhappiness. This happens. So how we get caught by this crocodile? It is again given in the previous verse. When we read the whole text, you can find there is a movement of human consciousness and evolution. If you study text from verse 1 to the last, 584, the 85th, the 3 different versions. But if you want to follow the line of spiritual evolution, then we have to skip certain verses. It's one from the other. You have to go forward and then come back to it. So that is true of Yoga Sutras also. So now we come to 142nd. That also talks about this concealment and projection. When Atman, the effulgence of Atman is completely concealed due to this superimposition, due to delusion, due to this mighty big crocodile which catches us and imprisons our self. It cannot and it doesn't really imprison, but that's how we experience. We feel there is no sunlight, and we feel there is only dark clouds. So we worry, but actually there is sunlight. That's why it is called delusion. Delusion is not reality. So when this happens, when this effulgence, Thirobhude Swatmani Amala Yajo Jivati Puman Anatmanam Moha Ahamiti Shariram Kalayati. So what happens is, when this supreme reality, Atman, its effulgence is completely concealed, then we look upon our body as the real I. You can imagine this. If we can, even while going through the ordinary human experience, for some time if we can remind ourselves that, I have something other than this body. Or even at a higher level, I am something other than this mind. Then body becomes your instrument. So otherwise body becomes the master. Yeah. If a person is imprisoned by body consciousness, he will not be able to have any kind of peace in this life. Or if he identifies himself with every human emotion that emerges in the mind, he will not be able to sleep. Even for those who are suffering from problem of sleep, due to anxiety and due to a concern for things of this world, for some time, That's true, but I'm something other than,
Yes.
higher than this body, higher than this mind. Once we can remind ourselves of this fact, you find the problem is gone. Because body as it can never be perfect. Even the mighty big boxers who are supposed to be very healthy, after 10 years you find those fellows are in the hands of the caretakers. Parkinson's, where the body, strong body has disappeared. Something else, they become vegetables. It happens. Huge muscular fellows whom we see after 10-15 years, they become like vegetables. So, no offense meant, what it means, it shows on the one hand the possibility of a strong physical body, and on the other hand the possibility of the same person becoming a piece of vegetable after 10-15 years. So that physiological fact which every doctor, medical doctor can verify, itself shows you the great philosophy that is expounded here, but this body is not perfect. But the point is, this intellectual conviction is left behind every time when there is a slightest bodily problem. It doesn't mean that we should neglect the body, not at all. We cannot neglect the body of mind. We can't do that. As I mentioned earlier, this body it can be a very wonderful instrument. The mind can be a wonderful instrument. This mind should cooperate, and only we can read wonderful scriptures and think wonderful thoughts. So mind is very useful, very much necessary, and very helpful. But mind is your enemy if you become its servant. That's the problem. Mind becomes an enemy the moment you become its servant. How do we become servants of mind? Whatever the mind suggests through the five senses of perception and action, if we go after that, the mind can be the worst enemy. Mind can be a very wonderful friend, a philosopher, a guide, a teacher, the moment we can link our mind to something higher than mind itself. So, when mind is not our master, he is a wonderful friend. When mind becomes our master, he is a terrible dictator. How does mind dictate to us? Through the senses. Mind is always projected towards external things, sensory objects, through the eyes, through ears, through the sense of touch, sense of taste, and sense of smell. Mind can be a murderer, a killer. That's what Shankaracharya himself says elsewhere. It comes in this text itself. That text is Sabdadavi Panjavi Reva Panja Panjattama Bussa Gudena Batthaha Kuranga Madanka Padanga Menaha Brunga Nara Panjabi Ranjidaki. How this mighty crocodile catches you and leads you to our destruction. Leads the gullible person who interprets himself to be this body, nothing more than this body. To be this mind, nothing more than this mind. How such a person is led to his own destruction by an unscrupulous dictatorial mind. So it says, Sabdadavi Panjabi Reva Panja. Mind is connecting with the world through the sense of sight, sense of hearing, sense of smell, sense of taste, and sense of smell. So 5 members from the animal kingdom are recruited to explain this. First one is deer. So in ancient times, these hunters used to play violin, some kind of a musical instrument, and hearing this music, the deers hiding in a bush or a cave will come out and it will be shot by an arrow, by the archer, by the hunter. So it will be killed. The sense of hearing becomes the cause of death. And then the elephant, Madanga means the elephant. Elephants move in crowds, in herds. They touch each other for mutual protection. The baby elephant will be guarded by the mother elephants. And when they move together, touching each other, the sense of touch leads them to their own destruction, because there will be pits dug by the hunters and they fall in a pit and they are caught, enslaved and killed frequently. Then fish. Fish is attracted by the bait, sense of taste, and is caught and killed. And then moth, small tiny insects that emerge during rainy season, will be attracted by blazing fire. They think that this visual image something very attractive, very wonderful, and is caught and they are killed. And then finally the small little tiny creatures, butterflies, which move from flower plant to flower plant in a garden. They are drawn by the wonderful smell. The sense of smell becomes a trap for them and they are killed. Some other animals will come and kill them when they are moving the flower gardens. This happens. So, when mind connects with external sensual objects, then mind connects all of us, mind draws us towards those objects, then mind becomes the worst enemy. But the same mind can be diverted towards higher ideas, so that we'll be able to transcend mind. So that's why the author says, when this Atman or supreme effulgence is concealed due to ignorance, due to lack of sense control, due to identifying ourselves with every single desire, emotions and feelings, by being enslaved by the mind, what happens? A person considers himself to be body or his mind. Then he is caught in this trap, in this crocodile of delusion. Now the author explains how to get out of this. That's the next one. The verse is 138, so you have to come backward. So if we have at least 2 years to go and every day in a class, it will be very wonderful, very simple.
Yes.
But we have to finish the topics discussed in 585 verses in 9 classes. So this is the 138th verse. This verse tells you how to get out of this. Niyamita manasa amum tum swatmanam atmam atmanyahamiti sakshat vidhi buddhi prasada jeni marana taranga apara samsara sindhu pradara bhavakudartho brahmarubena samstha. What it means is, there is one way out. Refine the mind. That is a niyamita manam. Niyamita manasa means when the mind is restrained, when mind becomes our friend, when mind becomes our guide, our teacher, then what happens? Then we get a clear perception of the reality. So there is a very interesting statement by the same author in the commentary on the Gita. He says, Shastra samskara acharya samskara mana means mind can be processed and refined, made sublime. How? By feeding the mind by the great spiritual ideas. One may ask this question: how ideas can refine the mind? And how such a mind can eventually take us out of this trap, the jaws of this mighty crocodile in the form of delusion? It is possible. Now, this is a very interesting principle we have to keep in mind. It incorporates the principles of yoga psychology also. According to yoga psychology, mind or the way mind functions can be analyzed from 2-3 different angles. One analysis is this. One part of the mind is experience. The other part is our response to those experiences. So, one is experience called bhoga, the other is vega or udvega, means our reaction to these experiences. But normally when we don't practice any spiritual sadhana, spiritual practice, what happens? We don't bother. We don't draw a line between our desire and ourselves. We identify with every desire, with every thought, every emotion, every feeling that emerges in the mind. So you can see this. A slight pause between our intention to speak and the speech itself. So it's a very interesting thing. An idea emerges in the mind. When we immediately identify with that idea, the response reaction automatically follows. There is not even a split second difference between the emergence of the idea or impulse or emotion and our action or reaction to that. So the reaction could be twofold, either in the form of extreme obsessive attachment, extreme liking, or extreme aversion. These are only two ways in which mind reacts to its own emotions and feelings. Now, these processes, emergence of ideas and a response to those ideas, are analyzed much more elaborately by analyzing the thought processes and emotions emerging in the mind. So, mind is divided into 5 categories. The most primitive form of mind is a mind which is restless and also dull. It is a state of maybe semi-paranormal, maybe a slightly abnormal condition. The second state is called kshiptam. The second state is mudham. There it is dull, but restlessness is not felt by the person. He is so dull that there is no restlessness. The third state is vikshiptam. That's a normal state of human being. Most of the spiritual seekers at the early stage belong to this category. Excuse me. Now the point is, see, there are times when we feel the need to practice spirituality, to go for higher ideas, to change the paradigm of our life. There are people who, when they read books, when they go to prayer halls, when they listen to lectures, they are convinced of the need of changing or at least accommodating some spiritual values into our life system. Yes. This happens. But this conviction loses its intensity after some time. It returns again it loses intensity. So it's like the pendulum that moves from one end of the clock to the other end. This is the normal state of human beings. In fact, every civilized, cultured person more or less belongs to this category at the early normal stage of spiritual aspiration. When we try to evolve, even intellectually, not necessarily spiritually, even intellectually, when we try to evolve, there is always an attempt, sincere attempt, and there is always it is followed by downward trend. So it's not a straight line progression; it's a spiral movement progression. So what happens is, as we increase our spiritual practices, in a broader sense, as we feed our mind with more and more spiritual food, by connecting the mind to spiritual ideas in whatever way possible. It may be associating with fellow spiritual seekers, reading, maybe contemplating, even intellectual pastime will have some effect. So mind accumulates more and more spiritual thought currents, and slowly it gets more and more focused on some spiritual practices. Rather, the pendulum moving the opposite direction, it becomes less and less frequent. So conflicts slowly recede or decrease. When this happens, mind gets concentrated. That fourth stage is called ekagra, higher concentration. At last stage is niruddha, where we transcend the mind. Where that's when mind becomes one with Atman. So mind is after all nothing but a kind of movement of vrittis, vasanas and samskaras and impulses and emotions. When they get completely purified, then mind as we understand no longer exists. That's why mind turned inward, very difficult to turn the mind inward because by very nature it is projected outward. If you can turn the mind inward, it becomes one with Atman. Under normal circumstances, mind is always turned outward. Then it connects with external senses, external sensual objects or ideas and stimuli coming from outside. So when this happens, what really happens is slowly the waves in our mind recede and the crocodile slowly loosens its jaws. So that's why Jeni Marana Taranga Apara Samsara Sindhu, mighty ocean full of waves. What are these waves? Falling, racing and falling waves. Birth, life, death and rebirth. This is called the constant movements of waves of this ocean. So you come out of this. So now one important point to remember is life as we understand under normal circumstances is considered to be something to be transcended. So that idea is there in all traditions. We discussed yesterday. Swamiji was referring to that. The idea that there is a kingdom of heaven for us to reach, to attain, which means something should be left behind. There is a higher region, higher level that we should reach eventually. That idea you find in all great spiritual traditions, whether Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, everywhere you find that. It also is related to this idea that life as we understand is a state of imperfection. It needs some improvement. That improvement or its higher progression takes place when you leave behind these mighty waves of desires, actions for fulfilling those desires. Then what happens? We go beyond this ocean of life, death, rebirth, and again life, death and rebirth. This wheel of, the rotating wheel of what is called samsara. Samsarati idi samsara means it goes so moving forward, flowing, constant flow without an end. But the moment we pause for some time and then think, well, what is the reality behind? That moment what happens? We are actually trying to come out of this wheel. We can come out of the wheel only when we stop for some time. So that is called sadhana-chatushtaya Vedanta, or listening to scriptures, meditating on the scriptural ideas and trying to identify itself. That's one way to do that. And there is always, I have heard this criticism, people that they say, there is always a lot of scope for self-deception in spiritual life, spiritual philosophy. So, Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel, I don't want this bread-winning education. So, all spiritual ideas are meant to be experienced and practiced. So, if you take an almanac and squeeze, you don't get a drop of water. So, we should not study any scriptures. Sri Ramakrishna was talking about this after reaching the highest samadhi. But before that, Sri Ramakrishna used to discuss great spiritual ideas with all those whom he met. Even as a little child, he used to discuss spiritual ideas with wandering monks and ascetics. Yeah. He used to discuss spiritual ideas with wandering monks and ascetics. So then he says the highest experience is beyond books and ideas. So a PhD professor tells you, you don't have to, he doesn't have to practice alphabet every day. But he had to do it 50 years back when he was in the kindergarten. So that's a very, very important point to remember. We open our mental door only by keeping our mind open to spiritual ideas. That's the first natural beginning of spiritual change. Because the mind is right now full of many other ideas. They are not always helpful. These ideas sometimes create problems. Mind is like a bag. Lot of good ideas, a lot of bad ideas, bad impressions. The store of good ideas should be increased. Need not read books, but you should listen to ideas. When we think, then these ideas become part of the mental system. And then what happens? Then we come out of this samsara, this ocean of samsara. This is a great philosophy expressed here. So you can imagine the imagery of the ocean, the imagery of waves rising and falling, desires, impressions, feelings, emotions. And we identify, wrongly we identify with every single rising and falling wave. And we forget that it's a mighty ocean actually. We lose sight of the ocean and we identify ourselves with that every tiny bubble, every little drop of water, every little wave that comes and goes. So the author tells you, you become aware of the ocean and then you will overlook the significance of these little bubbles, few drops of water, the rising and falling waves. So this is the natural discipline that we must take up. And then what happens is, then you can just take this verse 129. That again deals with the true nature, the Atman. Once we understand this, yam pasyadi swayam sarvam, yam na pasyadi kinchana, yaschetayadi buddhyadi, na tadyam chedayantyah. The meaning is, yam pasyadi swayam sarvam. The one, that Atman, that sees everything. And this verse comes just after analysis of the Atman as the one seer and perceiver in the three states of consciousness called waking, dream and deep sleep states. There is one consciousness, one seer, one perceiver, one experiencer, one subject who remains untouched by the changes with regard to experiences. What we experience in dream is different but not totally unrelated to what we experience in waking state. And in deep sleep state, we don't experience anything. Which means there's a change, there's a difference with regard to the seen objects, the perceived objects. But the seer, what called drashta in Sanskrit, the witness remains same. Who is that witness? I was present even when I was dreaming. I was present when I am in the waking state. And I was present even when I was in deep sleep. That's why I feel this great feeling of restfulness after waking up. Who was that real I? If you go after this inquiry, you will find that there is one real I who was present in all the three states. That I, the seer, doesn't belong to any of these states, but also belong to both the states, which means it transcends all the three states. If you have got a house with 3 rooms, you cannot be limited to one room, you can go to all the 3 rooms. So, you can't say you can only enter one room. if the house is yours. So, this Atman is present in all the three states. But the rooms are different, the experiences are different. The experiencer is the same. And that experiencer is called Turiya. So, this is a unique analysis which caught the attention of many psychologists, including William James and Jung and many others in the 20th century. You find this unique analysis of the real nature of human being without any reference to any transcendental creator God idea. One can self-discover one's own true nature by analyzing his own experiences in all the three states of waking, dream and deep sleep state. This is very interesting. Okay, now here I must point out one important thing, because often we refer to the pantheistic ideas or pantheistic ideas and so on. There are 5 levels of evolution in the idea of God. One is the most elementary idea of a transcendental reality is equating nature with God, the sublimity, the grandeur, the plurality, the mind-boggling variety of created world, is glory and greatness and grandeur. So you equate this manifold world to a transcendental reality. It's called pantheism. More or less you find in the works of Brahma, especially Brahma is the great well-known work of Emerson. You find it among the transcendentalists in Kate, and also in the writings of the 19th century English poets like Keats, Shelley, Wordsworth, all you find. So this is one state called pantheism. The second one, which is somewhat related, is pantheism, which is not often considered to be distinct from pantheism, where along with identifying the absolute reality with nature, you identify an inherent, an immanent spirit within all these natural objects. You find it primitive, not primitive I would say, that the early Indian, Native American concepts of spirit pervading the earth, and also the Shinto religion, in the Japanese Shinto tradition, where they thought that everything in nature has a spirit within it, which is not physical. It is there, but it is not physical. It is not unrelated to the physical, but it is distinct from the physical. So that's one we call pantheism. The third one is called polytheism, where every single natural phenomenon is considered to be the external manifestation of a guiding divine entity, gods or goddesses or angels, whatever. You find this in the Greek mystery religions or the pre-Christian Roman, pre-Christian European religious traditions. You find. The another one is monotheism, which is naturally common to popular Hinduism, Vaishnava, Shaiva, Shakta, or Abrahamic religions. You find this, where a creator God is projected, one who is responsible for creation, with a definite purpose and a way of modus operandi in managing this world, all that. Now, Vedanta doesn't say all these are wrong. It never says all these are wrong. Absolutely not. But following this path, if you go through this path, as you evolve to a higher and higher level of our own spiritual growth, then we come to an understanding there is, in fact, an impersonal, attributeless, transcendental divine reality which is immanent in everything, which is omnipresent, which is also transcendental. That is called a monistic idealism, which is attributed to Vedanta. So that's what is said here. Yam pashyati swayam sarvam yam na pashyati. That Atman which perceives everything, because it is immanent, present in everything. And it is not seen by anything, because it cannot be objectified. Seeing in the ordinary empirical sense means you see something with your mind and eyes together. You hear something with your mind and ears together. So like that, you cannot see this Atman, because the Atman is present within us. So, yat pashyati swayam sarvam. That Atman, that absolute reality which sees everything, everywhere, and whom now nothing can see, is chedayadi buddhyadi, that which activates, energizes mind, intellect, body, everything. Tadyam chedayatya. Not tadyam chedayatya. Means it is not activated or energized by anything. It cannot be illumined by anything, but it illumines everything. So, that is the highest ideal understanding of Atman. One important point to remember is, it accommodates, it accepts, it harmonizes all the other views. So, every conceivable religious idea is accommodated and integrated and harmonized within this concept. Because as we evolve, our understanding of spirituality and God also evolves. Then we don't reject or say it is wrong. Say, professor doesn't say, oh, all the alphabet that I studied in the kindergarten primary is called wrong. You don't say that. You go beyond it, that's all. So you don't conflict. You do have no contradiction, no conflict. So that is the highest understanding. It comes in the 129th verse in this text. Yat pashyati swayam sarvam, the one which sees everything, and whom no one can see, no one can objectify. That's the idea. See, given objectification. You are the subject, what you see is the object. That way you cannot see Atman. The Atman is present everywhere. It is the one that illuminates everything. It is not illumined by anything. It doesn't require, it doesn't need to be illuminated by or revealed by anything, any external illuminator. That's the idea. So we'll continue discussion maybe tomorrow. We have, I think, 3 more classes: Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We can have discussion for half an hour.
Swami, I have a question about whether or not the popular song "April Showers" captures some of the spirit of the cloud analogy. The song, which was my father's favorite, goes, "Though April showers come our way, they bring the flowers that bloom in May." And then later in the lyric, there's something like, "So the showers, something about they wipe out the flowers, but they also bring later on crowds of daffodils."
Yeah.
So keep listening and hear the song, hear the eternal song, it was referenced, and whenever those April showers come along. It was a very popular treatment.
Yeah.
It was a song sung in the early part of the 20th century by popular performers. And there is that idea of the sun always shining behind the clouds.
Yeah.
So in that simple popular sense, does that capture the spirit of these passages?
You know, poets, thinkers, creative writers always, when they just break over, go beyond a particular level of imagination, they will get a glimpse of this. So a poet may catch that reality in his own words, a painter may do, a musician may do. Wherever you find a state where the human soul identifies itself with some transcendental reality, there is a spark of Advaita in it.
I got the impression that my father gravitated towards that song because he had survived battles.
Yeah.
And he felt that, oh well, look, I made it, but for what did I not perish in war?
Yeah.
You know, and he kind of said, well, there must be some good in it, and he was looking for that.
Yeah, I had to talk to at least some 15 or 16 war veterans, mostly those who returned from Iraq war during the last 5-6 years in San Francisco. So it's not just traumatic condition. The experiences they underwent just opened their eyes to something, towards something, which he can only call transcendental. Because the limitation of human bodily existence. See, they are close friends traveling in an armed carrier, 15 or 16 fellow soldiers. All the colleagues die, and this man alone physically survives. So that made him think, where did they go? They were talking, and it suddenly maybe a drone attack or some artillery attack. So it happened. So you find when people with some kind of higher sensitivity, when they come in contact with the stark reality, shocking reality that this healthy human being can just disappear in one split second, nothing to be seen, suddenly they confront with the shocking reality of the limitation of this physical existence. That quickly opens their mind to something else. And you find a good number of monks, I'm told, who joined the Vedanta Society. They joined just after the Second World War, and a few after the Vietnam War. See, that's it, because sensitive people who are not warmongers, who are normal, decent human beings, when they had to do something, they're shocked with the reality, they have to do something which they won't do. So suddenly they're confronted with the reality, the limitation of human physical existence. That forces you, compels you to look towards something higher than the body, the physical, the empirical. So that's why the surprising thing is, you find the Korean War and Vietnam War, the people will return, they didn't become enemies of Koreans or Vietnamese. They started going back to Korea, Cambodia and Vietnam and started sitting at the feet of the Buddhist monks there. You can see the history of the emergence of Buddhist monasteries in this country after Second World War. Not only after the Tibetan invasion by the Chinese. See, many of them brought back with them, when they returned from Vietnam and Thailand and Cambodia, they brought back them this spiritual culture. Because I remember reading a book, an American military officer happened to visit Thailand or Cambodia and visited a monastery, and he found an old monk sitting there who had no quarrel with Americans. So that really shocked him. He was so disturbed that this monk had no quarrel with Americans who had fought with Vietnamese, and he sat at the feet of the Vietnamese monk, and he himself became a great admirer. He had converted to Buddhism. He was really shocked. After committing all the terrible crimes, they didn't have any hostile feelings. So this old monk sitting and asked him to join the meditation and all that. He casually visited. So you find this happens. Suddenly you are confronting with a different and ancient spiritual ideal, and something happens in your mind because you are yourself a little bit nobility, decency in your own character. That suddenly causes this transformation. This happened. So there also they get a glimpse of the transcendental. How else do you explain this? Poet can catch it, maybe from a distance. So a painter, a musician. So this could happen, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Swami, it makes a lot of sense to be able to work through emotions, thought processes that keep us in association with the body.
Yeah.
I think a huge problem comes in from physical pain. People who are in intense physical pain, then thinking that the body, not associating with the body, then becomes extremely difficult.
That's true, that's true, that's true. But even at that stage, connecting with this idea can be helpful. See, suffering pain with the full conviction that you have this body only, nothing other than this body, is much more painful than suffering the same pain with an intellectual conviction at least. Well, this body is something to me that's other than this body. So, it can be helpful. It cannot be a substitute for medicine, but it can be helpful. There are people who also don't like to take medicines. So, but the idea that we have a spiritual aspect to our life, a transcendental aspect to our life that goes beyond the physical, the mental, is always helpful. And again, it brings in a sense of richness to our existence and a new meaning and relevance to our life. See, if we interpret ourselves as a physical being, in what way are we different from animals? Just simple question. In what way are we different from animals? Animals also need house, food, clothing. Also they find in San Francisco extreme cold. Even dogs also I could go and sweated away. So animals also need practically more or less whatever we need. But then once we, even in the midst of these physical problems, if we can keep in our mind, well, there is a higher non-physical possibility, a non-physical dimension to me. That will be helpful. In fact, that's why people who are confirmed cutthroat atheists, non-believers, they also ask for some counseling in the hospitals, in the hospice. Find. So why do they ask for it? They ask for it. So I get calls. I'm not trained for that work. So why do they need it? So when the physical body goes through intense pain, we have to take medicine, but there is something else that happens.
Yes.
Even the medicine that takes you reduces the physical pain. Along with that, well, I have to go through this and I have to take this medicine. That feeling also comes an additional source of pain. That can be reduced by keeping in mind I have a non-physical, a higher, a spiritual dimension to my life. And to be very frank, if you read the stories of war veterans who returned from Vietnam and Korea, this happened to not to scores but to hundreds, maybe thousands. You see, that explains the mystery of the popularity of Buddhism in America. Really speaking. Because they returned, they didn't have any hostile feelings towards Vietnamese and Koreans. Rather, they came back, many of them, not all, spiritually, culturally enriched. Because they got a glimpse of these, in those days, Vietnam and Korea, very poor, backward places where old monks sitting under trees, and they smiled at these American war veterans. They were suddenly, there was nothing to thank for war. But they didn't have any hostility. That really shocked their minds. And they came with spiritually enriched. And many of them, in fact, encouraged, they helped these monks who came from Far Eastern countries to start Buddhist monasteries, Buddhist industries in this country. So how do you explain this? So the nobility, the inherent nobility of these people who fought in those countries responded to a higher spiritual human possibility that they found in these ancient civilizations. So you can see, it's possible to transcend the physical. Yeah.
Yes, and probably, inside of them, their spiritual
nature
That's true. Yeah.
was awakened
Yeah.
and touched
Yeah.
and came to the surface
Yeah.
and then affected the outer
Yeah.
world. I have two other thoughts, Swami. There's a poem that I know and often say, and it refers to the clouds, and it says, "What chased the clouds away?" And then the answer is, "'Twas love, whose finger traced aloud a bow of promise on the cloud." What chased the clouds away, 'twas love with a capital L,
Yeah.
which traced aloud a bow of promise on the cloud. And that's very comforting to know that
Yeah.
it's not a silver lining,
Yeah.
but traced
Yeah.
of a higher consciousness than self on the cloud and then disperses it. And I also thought of our friend Dostoevsky,
Yeah.
when always comes up in our discussions. But when he was, in Siberia and sentenced to a death that was coming
Yeah.
to him, he was supposed to be shot and then he had to wait a long, long time.
Yeah.
And finally was let out and standing there and waiting for the bullet,
Yeah.
to come his way. And at the very last moment,
Yeah. The messenger came and
the message came that
appeared.
he was to be released.
Yeah.
And it had a tremendous effect on him.
What
because
happened? He may have transcended the physical for a
Yes.
split moment.
Yes,
He understood the limitation of the physical because physically he was going to an end,
yes.
end of his life. So suddenly, see, I would be here. I may not have been here if the messenger was 1 minute late.
Right.
So that thought, that kind of total transformation turns upside down your normal mental system.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes,
and this turning upside down may give you a glimpse of the transcendental. But again, it will be a kind of aberration. But any turning towards the transcendental can give you some kind of supernatural powers of imagination, creative writing, which he eventually did, in fact, was the case.
Right, and that makes life more than endurable.
Yeah, true.
When we can just glimpse that
Yeah.
reality.
See, a person who is a very normal man, very healthy mentally and physically, taking his food exactly on time, getting up exactly on time, he won't be able to write a Ratasu Karamazu. Whatever he writes won't be worth reading. Because that kind of ordinary, ordered, disciplined mind will be so programmed, it will never be able to connect with the transcendental. So a bit of aberration is a prerequisite for that. In that part, William James says when he compares insanity with genius.
Yes.
Right? So coming to this subject is a very important thing. Even in ordinary life, while going through physical problems, one can always remind himself or herself that you have a transcendental, higher possibility. In fact, that conviction will have some soothing effect. Because otherwise, you will be looking upon yourself as an entity that is going through this terrible pain. But I have another entity which is not going through this pain. So you will be able to connect with the other one, even while going through this. So that's why, in fact, this becomes a psychological need and a remedy. That's why people ask for this counseling. Even cutthroat atheists, non-believers will look for some sort of something. That's why one of the most sublime prayers in Vedic literature comes in the Ishavasya Upanishad. I know Shankaracharya is the author of the most exquisite devotion poetry in Sanskrit. All these poems we find full of this higher devotional humanism. Not Advaitic dialecticism, but devotional humanism you find, not 36 mighty big long poems. But in the Ishavasya Upanishad, the Upanishad comes to an end. There it says, the seeker, the spiritual seeker is praying to God. You know what he's praying for? He prayed to his own mind. Your mind, turn back and think of all the sublime good deeds you have done. And all good memories of good deeds, good thoughts you have gone through. Please remember, please go back to those memories. So he is pleading to his own mind to turn back and remember all the good deeds he has done, all the good thoughts he has thought, all the good words he has spoken.
That's amazing.
There is a prayer to his own mind. He's not praying to God. There is a prayer to God, but here he is praying to his own mind. So.
Swami, what's the name of the book of Shankaracharya's poetry?
Okay. Saundari Lekari, Ananda Lekari, Shivananda Lekari, Subramanya Bhujanga, Chatusashti Bhujara Puja Sutra, Shivabhrada Kshabhavana Sutra, Vishnu Satpati. The list is very long.
Is there a book or a...
Oh yeah, yes, any number of books are. There is, there are many books, but one of the most authentic translations by T.M.P. Mahadevan, he has translated, or many of these into English. Maybe if you ask our bookstore, just English translations of Shankaracharya's.
And who is the translator that you're recommending, Swami?
T.M.P. Mahadevan is one. There are many. There are I would advise that you have a look at one or two translations. Yeah. There are some versions with the original is given with translation. There are some kind of freelance translations by very beautiful poetic translations. Yeah.
Thank you.
And also there's that little book called Self-Knowledge.
Yeah.
And then at the back of that are a number of Shankara's poems, translated, I think, by Swami Nikhilananda. And they're just beautiful.
Yeah,
and it's a very good place to start, isn't it? Good.
Yeah, right. Because the humanism element comes from bhakti, devotion. The philosophical dimension comes from Advaita. And you combine both. And he said at the experience level, the highest devotee and the highest man of intellectual analysis, Jnana Yogi and Bhakti Yogi, reach the same point of realization. Yes. Which himself was one example.
Is it like in the beginning we had a identity with the transcendental stage, and then avidya or delusion came and changed our perception? Is it like there was a transformation that we are trying to go back to our original state? Like in the Christian also religion, it's something like there was a fall, right? So is that originally how did we, human soul evolve? Did it start with this avidya, or it started with, with vidya and then it got deluded?
Yeah, avidya is the state in which we identify ourselves with the non-absolute, the relative, the unreal. Okay. Now, how did it all begin? A human being cannot be without mind. And human mind. And mind naturally expresses itself through the five senses. So, there are two ways of looking at this. The highest spiritually evolved person will also be living in this world, will be working with this mind and the senses naturally, but he will always remember that he has got a higher spiritual transcendental dimension. So he won't identify with all that his mind brings him. But those who have not taken up the spiritual journey, they will begin and end with this identification. They will identify with everything that happens at the mental level. Okay, Vedanta is essentially a way of going back to the cause. It's more like science. You look around, see this world, and also our own mental world, world of our emotions and ideas, and try to analyze their nature, and then come to an understanding they are only changing phenomena. there is behind that there is an unchanging reality. That is all. So you are trying to connect yourself with that real transcendental truth, going beyond the relative. So Vedanta doesn't begin by saying that one day the world was created in a particular manner with these rules and regulations and all that. Doesn't say. That's the easier way of explaining. But that will raise many objections, many questions. But instead of that, you don't begin by putting above everything a person who creates this world. That's a very simple thing. But he says, look at the world, its nature, its characteristics, and the world of our own emotions and feelings and ideas. And then we find they are impermanent. And in that sense, they are not absolutely real. So what is the real nature? What is the reality? That's how the inquiry begins. Finally, you realize your true nature is that you are that eternal, everlasting, permanent reality. And then you don't explain it. It's a matter of experience. This level of experience happens to all great devotees in all traditions. The difference is this. In many traditions, the hierarchy will not allow you to express this. That's the only difference. Human beings are the same everywhere. The Atman is solely the same in every human being. Body also is the same, as every doctor can tell you. There is a difference. How this Atman manifests or expresses through our emotions and feelings, there's a difference. So you find in all traditions, in all religious traditions, even among people who don't formally endorse any religious views, you find some highly evolved spiritual persons. So that's a very important point to remember with Vedanta perspective. So it is not the result of following a particular discipline. It is needed, you need a discipline, but it is a natural state of the human reality. That's why I said, these higher spiritual seekers or Vedantins, you find in all traditions, in Christian, in Sufi, in Buddhist, in Jewish, of course, Hindu, everywhere you find. Because the highest peak of human sublimity, human spiritual evolution is possible in all traditions. As I mentioned, in certain traditions, you put a block, you are imprisoned, you cannot come out. If you express, then you are considered to be going against the essence of religion. Actually, this is the essence of religion. So that's an important point. So we will continue the discussion tomorrow. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.